So technically, the only form of actual real commitment is if you involve the state.
No, I would no, I wouldn't say that per se. I mean, it just all depends on how you was brought up and what you believe in. I think that if you introduce that, if you have a conversation, let's just say at dinner, Starbucks with Hink, and then you're asking about like your beliefs and your values, and if they disclose that they don't believe in marriage, and I think you have an idea what you're getting yourself into. Now, if a man was to spring that along, maybe like 2 or 3 years into the relationship without having any discussion surrounding that, then I can see where somebody might be like, "What are you talking about?" Because I don't 100% know because I haven't done any surveys, but I would think at least within my circle of people that most people look at marriage that you officially marriage when the state is involved. I know very few people that look at it based off just religion or we have a ceremony that doesn't involve the state. This is something that I'm starting to hear a lot more often just because we are able to have these conversations via YouTube and Instagram, Clubhouse, and so forth. So I think it wouldn't be a problem if they had a conversation beforehand, but I would see it being a problem if it just comes out of nowhere and nobody knows what type of page the other person is on when it comes to marriage.
Right.
Well, JR, not for nothing. A lot of people talk about not involving the state and stuff like that, but most people who are getting married are common day folks. They ain't got a whole lot. They ain't got millions and they're inheriting all this stuff. Like people literally have, a decent life, a decent break point. They're not coming to this relationship with like millions of dollars in the bank. You know what I'm saying? Or a crazy estate. We're talking about that based on the minority of people who are in a smaller bracket that we tend not to see very often that have those business like conversations about marriage and you know prenups and all these other things, not saying that other people shouldn't engage in those things, in those practices, but we talk about it as if it's the gospel and the standard across the board. That's not true. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people are more worried about losing things that they don't have than worrying about losing the person that they have, that they could have for the long haul and do this thing called life. You know what I'm saying? And one last thing I'm gonna make, because this is something that was brought up last week. So there was an op-ed article in the UK that came out this week talking about that 2/3 of women between the ages of 18 and 45 are the loneliest they've ever seen on record. And there's a huge complaint about it. You know what I'm saying? We're slowly starting to see this become a very more prominent issue in our society. Not only across the pond, but soon enough here in the States. And regardless of how you cut it, I think that it might get to a point where they might actually make common law more common, or they're going to find a way to finagle, because that right there becomes also a tax burden or a societal halt issue as well. And sort of they're always going to try to find some sort of way to navigate and fix the issue, which really is just people need to fix themselves. Other people don't need to be involved. That's all I got.
Yeah, and before we move on, that's a good, excellent question, Sweeney. But I'm really proud of when we had these conversations because I don't think any one of us would have been privy to a lot of this, uh, to like a lot of this dialogue that's happening right now. Because even when you think how we was programmed to think that we had to go to college in order to survive, now I'm hearing so many discussions that's saying that maybe college may not be the way. Even when we talk about these, when we have marriage and we involve the state, I think Luis made a good point where we have to start looking at ourselves because we depend so much on the state to be able to make the decisions as far as what we do when it comes to our marriage. So I'm all for having these conversations because at least it gets our mind spinning to decide what it is that we want to do when it comes to our commitment and how our marriage is going to look within ourselves.
I'll say this one thing too, JR. When people file, yeah, women might file for divorce at a high rate or whatnot, but households that make 250,000 and up have an 18% or less of divorce compared to people outside of that threshold. So what does that tell you all? people with more money have more reasons to stay together, right? We keep having the conversation circling around certain money and certain things, but in reality, what we're talking about is not so much the money; it's the quality of life and how you frame and structure that around your marriage for you.
I was gonna say too, to what you were saying is the higher, up the socioeconomic status, a lot of times the marriages are better, right? In terms of lasting. Not saying that they don't get divorced, but they divorce at a lower rate. But also, I have read information too that stated that typically a higher education level as well. There's a correlation between divorce and less, and the education level. But what I was initially going to say about this idea of saying we don't need a paper to basically say to confirm our commitment. If we're going to commit, we can do it, without involving anybody else. But to me, and this is just my perspective, is I think it is along the lines of the same. If you got the piece of paper, is the fear. I think it's the fear of failure in the marriage. So if I don't jump all the way in, then I don't have to deal with the consequences that comes along with a failed marriage, right? And my take on that is if you don't need a piece of paper, the paper isn't that big of a deal for you, then the question is that if you know it's that big of a deal for her, then why not do it? Because that's not going to change your perception about the paper one way or the other. But for her, it would. So I don't understand why that would even matter. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing like a prenup, right? People will say, "Oh, if she doesn't sign a prenup, then that means she with him for the wrong reasons or whatever." So my take has always been, if any woman gets married and a man presents her with a prenup, I don't see what the big deal is for her to sign it, because the only way that the prenup matters is if you intend on divorcing. If you divorce. So as long as I stay in the marriage and the marriage is, worth it, then the whole idea of the prenup doesn't even come to fruition. So I think it's the same thing about like with marriage. If you go ahead and get the license, right, and your intent is to stay together forever, then you'll do whatever it is to try to make the marriage work. So you will never have to reap the consequences of what a divorce could bring. So that's kind of my own philosophy. So right now I'm not concerned, and that's not to say that I won't ever end up in a divorce. I can't control what my husband feels or thinks in terms of his marriage, just like he can't control what I feel or think in regards. So we can't control whether or not somebody's going to file. But I think if both of you are on the same mindset of this is truly until death do us part, that you're going to jump through the hoops, you're going to go to therapy, you're going to make adjustments, you're going to, sacrifice certain things in order to keep it together. So
I had a
if
question
you're
for you.
willing to do all of those things, then all of the paper talk is null and void.
I have a question for you. You said that the purpose of a man getting you to sign a woman to sign a prenup is if he intends to divorce her. Because wouldn't
I said for her, if he presents her with one and she doesn't want to, is always seen as she's just with you for your money, right? A lot of times I'm saying this is the perception, is that if a woman doesn't necessarily want to sign the prenup, then the perception is she's just with him for his money. What my take on it was, I was saying, if you offer the prenup, go ahead and sign. What's the big deal? If it's a lifelong commitment, the prenup will never come into play.
Can I speak?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
First of all, A prenuptial agreement is not necessarily a negative. It could benefit both parties. In the case of somebody falling and bumping their head, I don't think any woman should go ahead and sign anything without reading it and have somebody else read it for her twice. 'Cause she might be giving away her soul, even though she probably should if that's the man she gonna marry, not her whole soul, but at least her body. Prenups aren't bad. But I don't think anybody should just sign anything. And that's one of my biggest things with the state. I don't think you should just sign anything. But I get what you're saying. I don't think the intentions are bad, but if the prenuptial agreement doesn't benefit her at all, then she's a fool for signing that.
So
Because if it's prenup, like you get nothing, absolutely nothing, no matter what I do, don't sign that, sis. That man not for you. He planning on cheating. Go on, get up out of there. That's all I'm saying.
So why do
We
y'all
can balance in there real quick, yo, and then we can knock this out, yo.
Yeah, let's we got to kind of wrap this up because let's get Sam on there and see if Hank want to close us out.
You said me?
Yeah, I know you had your hand up. Bless you.
Yeah, I just this is the only thing. If you guys don't want marriage, that's fine. But you cannot argue about the birth rates being out of wedlock. Because guess what? If you don't marry her legally, it's gonna increase the out of wedlock rates. All that stuff that y'all complain about with the stats and stuff, you gotta throw that out the window, right? Because there's women right now having kids by a man she lives with, and they're in a committed relationship without the legal documents, and that's the rates going up. So that's all I want to say. If you're gonna push it to the side, all of it gotta be pushed to the side.
Well, sometimes she don't want to be married either.
That's true, but I'm just saying.
So we can still make the argument about birth out of wedlock.
Well, and if you look at that,
Hold on, we got to get to Hank to close us out on this one. Go ahead, Hank.
God, damn, we beat this horse to death.
I think it's
Look, man, I look at it like this. If you with a man and you know he doesn't want to marry or get married, then get out. Get the fuck out, ladies. I mean, why waste your time? Why waste your energy? And find you a man who's looking for the same thing. Has nothing to do with whatever religion, whatever belief it is. If you want marriage, find a man who that's what he wants. And that's what he's willing to give you. If you got a woman who's not willing and looking to have kids and you want kids, don't get with that woman. She don't want kids. She's not trying to give you any kids. Don't get with her. Don't get lost in the exterior, all that good looking stuff. Don't get lost in that. Because she's not willing to give you what you're looking for the most, and those are kids. Don't get with her.